Hi everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I am building the Roland surface-to-air missile made by Rocketarium. This is a very detailed scale model kit, and I don't recommend building this unless you've already built quite a few rockets and are used to working with very small parts. Inside the box we have quite a number of parts and templates and jigs here. So do go through and make sure you have everything, and keep in mind that a lot of the parts are stuck inside other parts. So I'm just going to go down the list here. Okay, so we've got the parachute and nothing hiding in that. Okay, and then we've got a set of fins here. Okay, and there are a total of 4, but they're calling them 2 sets. Right, we have some channels in here, and these are, looks like it's inside this package here. Okay, so here these are lots of trim pieces here. So some of these are edge pieces for the fins. Some are channels, some are other trim pieces there. Alright. Okay, we have a total of 3 body tubes. Alright, one of which has, in my case, they put the engine mount on here. This is a 3D printed engine mount for a cluster of 2 18mm engines. Right, we have a nose cone that's been pre-drilled for the canard fins. 2 bags of small parts here. So one of them has some plasticine clay, launch lugs, and the shock cord. The other has the canard fins as well as some other trim pieces there. Okay, and then we have 2 fin guides here, a large and a small. Alright, and then we have additional parts for the motor mount here, and these will go in conjunction with the tail cone. And then an ejection baffle kit. And this has its own instructions in it as well. Okay, so it looks like we have everything here. Okay, so I'm going to put this back together so we don't lose anything here. And when we come back, we'll start in on the engine mount. Now, according to the instructions, our first task will be to build the motor mount assembly. And for this, you're going to need the tail cone here. And then this plastic bag has a centering ring that will go on the forward end of the tail cone. And then we have 2 motor mount tubes with their clips. And there's one thrust ring. Let's see if we got one down inside here. And my other thrust ring was right on the edge of the table here. Overlooked it for a moment. So we've got everything there. So first we're going to use this spacer. I'm going to dry fit this first so we can see what it looks like. But we'll put some glue up in here and then take this ring, put the spacer in, and put it flush. And so that's going to give us the proper spacing inside for the motor. And you may have to push that all the way out. Okay, so we need to put some glue about 3/4 of an inch from the top. So for my motor mount tubes here, I'm just going to use an applicator here to put some wood glue down inside. All right, now whichever end is you're going to designate as the forward end, that's where the glue needs to go. Okay, about 3/4 of an inch down. I'm just going to put some glue all the way around in there. All right, and then sticking the thrust ring in the aft end, and then I'm going to use my spacer here to push that up. I'm just going to put it on the table and push it forward there, and you should be able to see then that it has pushed the glue forward and the ring is set in place. And now we want to pull this out immediately just in case there's excess glue. We don't want to have this stuck up inside. Alright, and then for the second motor mount, I'm going to do the same thing. Alright, once again, put the thrust ring in the aft end, push that up forward and into the glue, and then take that out again. Alright, so I'm going to let both of those dry for a bit and then come back to do the engine clips. Alright, now I'm going to measure for the engine clips, and this is my forward end, and just to make sure I don't get these mixed up, I'm going to write aft down here, and the same on the other one. Okay, and for the engine clip we need to measure 2 3/4 inches or 7 centimeters from the aft end. That would be 70 millimeters. That's going to be right here. And this should be right above the thrust ring. I'm going to do that on both. And I'm going to take a hobby knife and cut a slit there. And the slit should be about 1/8 of an inch long. Now if it's resisting, just come up a little bit, okay, just like that, so it's right above that edge. Okay, and now I'm just going to pop the right angled portion of the clip in there. Okay, you can see it in the glue, so that's where it's supposed to be. And then I'll repeat the process here with the second one. Once more, just pop that in, and it's right above the ring as well. Okay, and I can set those aside for just a moment. Okay, now we're going to take our tail cone here. Okay, this is the aft end, and I'm going to dry fit this first. Okay, so this is supposed to go in like this. There is a cutout for the engine clip. So that's going to slide all the way through. It might be a little tight there due to the 3D printing. If it's too tight, go ahead and sand it a little bit. Okay, and it may be just doing what I'm doing now, so insert it and pull it out a couple of times. Usually it just means there's a little bit of filament that's not quite packed down correctly. Alright, so that's the way it's going to look when we're done. So this should be flush down here with the plastic. Alright, and our clip will be able to extend this way. Alright, so this is going to get glued all the way around here. Alright, so they show putting a bead of glue completely around the aftmost section here. I'm going to skip doing it here as there's nothing to glue it to. And once again, I'm going to use an applicator. You could just use your finger. Okay, so let's push that back out a little ways. I'm going to put my glue around here. Now this has to be relatively heavy but not dripping, because it's going to go in and fill in between the little ridges on the plastic. And if you get some glue on the clip, it's not a big deal, it'll come free again. All right, so now I'm just going to push that right back in until it's flush. Right along the edges there. I'm going to wipe off that excess glue. Alright, so it should look like that. I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other one off camera. Now I have both motor mounts installed, and next we're going to put on the centering ring here. Now this has got a little bit of a bevel to it, so this edge is a little bit thinner than the other, and so that means it's going to go like this, so that that bevel faces this way. Okay, there is a problem here. Okay, so this actually says down, and this should face downward here. The problem is that the engine clip spaces here are on the wrong sides. So what I'm going to have to do here is just take a file and it doesn't have to be as low as the original cut ones that are on the wrong side. I just need enough wood removed to allow me to clear those clips. Now, according to the instructions, this is supposed to fit down inside the tail cone there, but there isn't enough of a bevel to do that. Okay, now it looks like it won't make any difference. Alright, so I'm going to put that on there. I haven't glued it yet, and now I'm going to take one of the body tubes here just for measurement. Alright. So the body tube still fits in place even though that bevel doesn't go down far enough. So I think we're okay here. So now I'm going to pull that back up to expose the other parts of the motor mount. So we're going to put some glue right along here. Because that's where the centering ring will seat up against the motor mounts there. And again, you want to have a heavy layer, but just not so heavy it's dripping, because you are trying to stick wood to plastic here. And the way that works is by having the glue get in between all the little cracks and crevices. Alright, so we also need some along the inside edge there. Now I've got some on the outside, and I may need to clean that, especially here where you can see I got a little bit there in that crack and a little bit here. Alright, I'm going to need to clean that out really quickly here, but for now I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe out this glue here. And I'm going to use a body tube again. I'm just going to put that on there briefly, twist it a few times, and pull it out. And that's just to get those little bits of glue out of the pieces here. Alright, and you can clean out the body tube if you need to. Alright, so everything's kind of squished together there, but the squished parts are beyond the motor blocks, or engine blocks there. And so this looks like we should be in good condition here, and I'm going to set this aside to completely dry. Next, we're going to put together the baffle assembly, and this comes in its own package and has its own parts and instructions. I'm just going to move some stuff aside here. Alright, and these come with almost every Rocketarium kit, so if you've seen my other videos, this is going to go together in exactly the same way. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to take the ring that has the small hole in the center, and the screw eye here. And then I'm going to just put some glue right on the tip of the screw eye, the screw part of the screw eye. And I'm going to screw that in there. I'm going to go until I reach the top of the threads. I want just a little bit of thread showing there. If you go beyond the threads, then there's nothing holding on and it'll pop loose and come through. All right, and then back here where the screw is showing, I'm just going to cover that up with a blob of glue. It doesn't have to be pretty. All right, but that will help anchor that in. All right. We're going to let that set and dry for just a little bit. Okay, and so the next one they say to put a thick ring of glue all the way around one end. All right, and then I'm going to take the other baffle. It's just going to pop right in there. Alright, if it goes through like that, that's fine. Just push it right back out. This one's being a little bit more difficult than usual. There we go. Okay, and I like to bring that up so it's just not quite flush, because that will give me an edge that I can glue around as well. Okay, so here I'm just going to run some glue all the way around that edge. And that way it's glued from both sides. Okay, and then I'm just going to wipe off that excess glue, turn that into kind of a fillet there. Alright, and then I'm going to go to the other side. And here it says to use a wide and thin. Okay, so we'll go. I actually usually end up doing both of them the same way. Okay, so I'm going to put this in. I'll bring it in at an angle, and then I'm going to pull it back toward. And just like the aft ring, or the aft baffle, I'm going to push that up just until there's a little bit of a lip there. Right, and usually there's enough glue at this point that you can just smooth that into a fillet without having to do anything else. If you want, you can add a fillet to that if you don't think you have enough glue, but make sure you don't clog the holes here. Okay, so that should look like that. And now I'm going to let this set aside to dry completely as well. Now, according to the instructions, our next step is to add the nose weight. And so you would normally take this plasticine clay, make little balls out of it, and stuff those down into the nose cone. I'm actually going to wait. Okay, now I don't want to skip this step because it'll be unstable without it, but we're going to be putting canards into these holes, and if you get some clay into those holes, it can interfere with the glue that you use to put on the canard fins. So I found that these types of models that have the canards in the nose cone, it's actually easier and more structurally sound to add the nose weight after you've glued and filleted on the canard fins. Now, something we can do at this point, and this is optional depending on how smooth you want your nose cone, but these nose cones always have a seam on them with kind of a ridge along one part and then a valley in there as well. And so something I like to do is sand that down as much as I can. And so I'm going to use some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to start by simply running it along those two seams. Okay, so what this has done is it's knocked down the ridges along that seam, but you can still see there's some little valleys in there. And sandpaper by itself, you can get rid of those. You have to do a lot of sanding. You take off a lot of material. Instead, I prefer to use a little bit of plastic model putty here to fill those seams and then come back and sand it smooth. So most hobby stores that carry models of one sort or another have these. Mine's a Tester's brand, and so there are several of them out there. This one is one you can just squirt on here. It's non-toxic, so it's not a big deal if you get your fingers in it. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is just smooth that in with my finger. Okay, and it starts to dry fairly quickly, although it takes longer to cure. So you want to do this part fairly quickly. As you can see, it's already beating up and trying to dry out on me. Okay, and I'm going to turn this around and do the same thing to that other seam. Alright, I got some in the hole there. That's not a big deal. We'll sand that out later. Okay. So now, this usually dries in an hour or two, and then once it's dry, we'll come back and sand it some more. But this I'm also going to put aside. So we've got lots of things drying that we'll come back to later. Now that the baffle has dried, we can install this into the body tubes. And the first thing we need to do is just make a mark here on the middle of that baffle tube. It's going to be right there at 1 inch. And we're going to start with the longest body tube here, and this is going to fit in this way. So the screw end should be sticking out. Alright, so we'll just put that up to that mark that we made, and then the other body tube will go over that. So to start off here, I'm going to just run a bead of glue along the inside here. Now we don't need a lot, but you do want at least a uniform bead here. And now I'm just going to put this in, turning it as I go, kind of twist it back and forth to seat the glue well. Okay, and now we're going to take the shock cord here. Alright, now if you want to use the rubber shock cord, that's fine. I am going to replace mine with Kevlar, but the overall procedure is going to be the same. So if you're going to use the elastic one here, then what you want to do is tie that on to the eyelet using a double knot. Something else you might want to do here, this screw eye actually has a considerable gap there between it, and you can close that using a pair of pliers. Alright, so just take some general purpose pliers here, put them on either side, and just give it a squeeze. Now it may try and keep springing open on me there. I've got still a little bit of a gap. That's going to be much safer that way. Okay, and then whichever shock cord you're going to use, the supplied one or Kevlar, you're going to tie a double knot into this. And you want to cinch that down really well. Make sure you pull it in all directions. Put that second knot in, and then put a dab of glue on that to keep it in place. Now I'm going to take this back off. So here I have some 100-pound test Kevlar, and it looks really thin, but this is actually stronger than that elastic. Okay. The drawback to Kevlar, though, is that it isn't elastic. It won't stretch. So you have to use quite a bit of it in order to allow the rocket parts to slow down enough that it doesn't just tear through things. So the general rule of thumb is to use 3 times the length of the rocket in Kevlar. You can use more even. Okay, so this rocket is about 27.5 inches long. Okay, or I can just round that to about 2¼ feet there. So I'm going to aim for about 7 feet. So I'm just going to wrap this around my ruler 7 times. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Alright, I'm going to go about 7½ there just to be on the safe side. Okay, and just cut that. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and tie this on just like I described with the elastic one. Try to get this so it's not casting a shadow over everything here. Okay, so I'm just going to pull the knots there, make sure everything is good. Alright, and then put just a little drop of super glue on that knot. And that's just so it doesn't unravel. Kevlar does have a tendency to unravel a bit. And I'm just going to cut off a little bit of the excess there so it doesn't get in the way later on. Alright, now I need the shortest body tube, a 6-inch one here, and I'm going to feed all of the Kevlar through it. Now here I'm going to depart from the instructions a little bit, and instead of putting the glue inside the tube, which is standard, I'm going to put it on the coupler itself, and for 2 reasons. One is I have less chance of getting my shock cord stuck in the glue in here, but also every time I put tubes together like this, there's always just a little bit of a gap or a discontinuity there. It's never perfect. And so by squeezing a little bit of glue around there, I'm hoping that that will make it a little bit more smooth. Okay, so I'm going to take this, run a bead of glue, and again I'm planning on this leaking out around the seam there. So if it seems like a lot of glue, it's because it is. Alright, so now I'm just going to take this, twist it down like this. Alright, that's even more glue than I had anticipated. Alright, but now I'm just going to take a finger here, and wipe that around. Okay, I'm going to smooth that around some more. We want most of the glue off. Alright, now I'm just going to give it a little bit of a twist again. Okay, and that's trying to do the gap that I was telling you about. So here I'm just going to hold that on for a few minutes. And we'll come back after this is dried for a bit. I've let everything dry now, so the body tube still has a little bit of gapping that occurred there, and you can fix that with some modeling putty or with some wood putty. Just smooth it over the seam and then sand that down. I'm not going to worry about that until I'm ready to finish the rocket though. Alright, also my motor mount is completely dried here, and just to make sure that everything dried in the right place, looks like it did. And then my nose cone and its modeling putty has also dried. And so now what I'm going to do is sand most of that off. I'm going to use 220 grit sandpaper. You can use a finer grit, say 320 or 400, but you probably want to knock down the really rough stuff here with the 220 before doing that. Personally, I just do the whole thing with 220, and then after I prime it, I can sand it again later. Now if you notice here, this is very quickly clogging up my sandpaper. Sometimes you can use a gum eraser to remove some of that, but otherwise you may just want to have a good supply on hand. Okay, so this is starting to show about what we want. We want actually most of this to be sanded away, leaving only the material that's down in the little valleys there. Okay, so you can see there's actually very little left on here. And there's still a little bit of a groove there. It looks like it got sanded out. And you can go ahead and reapply the filler if you need to. Alright, and then I'm just going to kind of scrape out the material that ended up in the holes there, just using the back side of my hobby knife. Alright, and now I'm going to go and just lightly sand the entire nose cone. And this is going to help the primer and the paint stick better. Now here again, you can use a finer grit sandpaper, but for this initial sanding I actually want a little bit of a tooth to it there. And so if you want a finer finish, sand the primer after you've done it. Okay, so I'm going to let this set aside for now until we're ready to put the canards on and then put the nose weight into it.